In the archives of the University of Chicago, a single photograph reopened the oldest trial in American history. But this time, it wasn't about witches. It was about the woman in the picture. The basement of the University of Chicago's history department smelled of dust, metal, and old paper. The scent was sharp and stale, clinging to the lungs with every breath. Cold air drifted between rows of rusted cabinets, and flickering fluorescent bulbs painted the concrete floor in a sickly yellow glow. The space felt less like a workplace and more like a forgotten chamber, sealed off from time. Researcher Eleanor Hayes worked alone that night. The building above her had long gone quiet. Her task was simple: scan colonial court records, catalog them, move on. She had done this hundreds of times before. The rhythm of the work was almost comforting, until something broke that rhythm. Behind a 1692 court document, a faint image shimmered across the scanner glass. It wasn't a sketch. It wasn't ink. It wasn't a shadow. It was photographic, modern, sharp, undeniable. The woman in the image looked impossibly out of place. Her hair was styled with precision. Her posture carried confidence. Her gaze was direct, aware. She looked like someone who understood the future. Eleanor frowned and leaned closer. Scanner glitch, she thought. A residue image, something explainable. But when she examined the paper fibers, the ink composition, the aging patterns, everything checked out. 17th century, untouched. Something felt wrong. A slow pressure built in her chest. Years of archival work had trained her instincts, and those instincts were warning her now. She felt watched. A low metallic hum echoed through the old ventilation shafts. The silence thickened, pressing inward as if the room itself was folding. Eleanor zoomed in on the image. Her breath caught. The woman's face looked exactly like her own. The same dimple, the same hairline, the same piercing eyes. Her pen slipped from her fingers and clattered against the floor. A chill ran through her body, sharp and immediate, leaving her hands trembling. That night, after she returned home, Eleanor couldn't sleep. When she checked her email shortly before dawn, she found a message waiting. No sender, no subject, only one attachment. A short video file titled Bishop. Her cursor hovered over it longer than it should have. Then she clicked. The screen flickered. A dark courtroom appeared, lit only by candles. Shadows danced along wooden beams. A crowd murmured softly, and at the center stood a woman in chains, Bridget Bishop. In the final frame, the woman turned and looked straight into the camera, but in 1692, there were no cameras. If history couldn't record images back then, who or what was watching? The next morning, Eleanor called Salem historian Professor Daniel Marsh. When she described what she'd seen, the line went silent. "This isn't just a document," he finally said. "It's what we call the Salem paradox." He explained that certain court archives contained anomalies, images or records that didn't belong to their era. Not forgeries, not later additions, intrusions. Especially in Bishop's case, he added. Bridget Bishop was the first woman executed during the Salem Witch Trials. Convicted without a real defense, hanged in June 1692. Yet the image Eleanor found appeared to show her moments before death. And in the background, stood a church wall historians knew had been restored in the 1950s. Sometimes, Marsh whispered, history echoes back at us. Some historians called such anomalies hoaxes. Others called them warnings. But no one denied their existence. Eleanor's doubt hardened into fear. She ordered a DNA test. When the results arrived, the lab technician stopped speaking mid-sentence. Eleanor was directly descended from the Bishop family. Her mother's maiden name surfaced in the records, Eleanor Bishop. The family had changed its name in the early 1900s. Without realizing it, Eleanor had been researching her own ancestor. History had drawn a circle, and she stood at its center. Outside, Chicago's wind howled through the windows, carrying the faint smell of rain and something else, smoke. For a moment, Eleanor thought she heard whispering voices buried in the static of her computer speakers. Her heartbeat quickened. A week later, she uncovered a dusty file labeled Visual Experiments on Historical Memory, Department of Psychology, University of Chicago, 1957. The report described experiments where participants were shown historical images. Several claimed to recognize faces that felt disturbingly familiar. One note made her blood run cold. Subject 7 reported resemblance to the woman in the image. Experiment terminated immediately. At the bottom, a handwritten comment read, "Anomalous reflection detected in the visual record." This wasn't inheritance. It was recursion. That night, Eleanor stayed late in the archive. Long past midnight, the scanner powered on by itself. The fan roared. The lights flickered violently. The room temperature dropped several degrees. Documents began appearing on the monitor line by line, as if someone, somewhere, was accessing the system remotely. Then came the smell of burning. The screen went black. A single sheet slid from the printer, still warm. On it was a face, Eleanor's face. But the eyes belonged to Bridget Bishop. The webcam light switched on, red, unblinking. Her body refused to move. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but she stood frozen as the printer clicked once more. A sound like a coffin lid closing. A week later, a letter arrived from an elderly woman in Salem. They used to say Bishop's spirit lived in the archives. It read, "Anyone who took a picture saw their camera die." Eleanor dismissed it as folklore until she found another photograph, dated 1920. The archivist's name was Margaret Lowell. She looked identical. Margaret's notes read, "I saw a woman who looked like me." Days later, she vanished. The echo had been repeating for centuries. In 2025, the university launched its digital archive reconstruction project. An AI system cross-referenced faces across eras, rebuilding them in 3 dimensions, matching bone structure, eye spacing, and micro-features. Eleanor's documents were part of the upload. A warning flashed on her screen. Duplicate face detected, cross-century match 99%. 3 images appeared, Bridget Bishop, Margaret Lowell, Eleanor Hayes, identical. Eleanor tried to delete the file. The system refused. Cannot delete. Linked to active user. Some experts later claimed it was a corrupted data loop, a recursive identity error. But if that were true, why did the entries keep updating long after Eleanor was gone? Some stories never stay buried. Some don't haunt, they persist. If you've heard the echo too, subscribe, because the next voice might be yours.